region.
Robert Kelly is a professor of international relations at Pusan National University in South Korea, and he joins us there now. Robert Kelly, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to Breakfast this morning. Give us your point of view. We spoke to our correspondent Lucy Williamson, who said, of course, there's a lot of bluster, but we do need to kind of at least acknowledge that the bluster is increasing, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's right. The bluster this time is worse than it's been in a while. The North does have a record of saying these sorts of outrageous things every once in a while, especially when there's a new South Korean president. We just got a new president a month ago, so this was expected, but it's a little bit more raw than normal, right? Which is why, there's been so much discussion of it. We're not really quite sure what this means.
So what's provoked the latest ratcheting of tensions?
Well, it was the nuclear tests and then the UN sanctions that followed this year. North Korea has been sort of saying one thing to the international community about nuclear weapons for a while, and then it's gone on and kept on developing them anyway. And this has continually provoked sanctions and response from the UN, from the United States, from Japan, South Korea, et cetera, right? And so the North, my own sense is the North uses those external punishments and sanctions actually for domestic regime legitimacy at home. It uses this to say to its own people, this is why we're still an independent North Korean state, even though we're poorer and weaker than our neighbors.
So how should we react then when you see the United States saying, we take these threats very seriously?
Well, that's necessary to say, right? I mean, we don't want the North Koreans to miscalculate. I mean, one of the big problems is that the new leader is very young, right? He's 29. We don't really know if he understands sort of how this dance, for lack of a better word, works, right? Usually what happens is the North will do something foolish and rash. The South will say, if you do that again, we're going to hit back, and then things kind of cool down. That's what happened in 2010. The thing is, though, in 2010, the provocations were so nasty, 50 South Koreans were killed, that the South Korean sort of leadership has really swung away from sort of patience and restraint and has said, if this happens again, we're going to hit back. And I think that's what people are worried about. Kim Jong-un doesn't really get it. He's new. If he does something foolish, the South Koreans are going to hit back, and then people worry about a spiral.
How likely do you think that's going to happen?
Good question. I'd say it's under 50%. I think that the people around Kim Jong-un are smart enough to know that if this thing really spins out of control, it's over. I mean, North Korea, the regime will collapse, and all those leaders, if they survive the war, they'll wind up in prison. South Korea still has the death penalty. They'll wind up before a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, and eventually probably the hangman. So my guess is they'll probably back down.
So just tell us what's happening on the ground now. How does this affect everyday life between South Koreans and North Koreans? Because there are some connections, there are some work connections still.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a small export processing zone, I suppose, called Kaesong in North Korea, where South Korean companies actually function and work, and they make things for export, little gadgets and stuff. If that is closed, right, if the North or the South chooses to close that and cease that interaction, that is actually a red flag that something might happen. That's why I still think this is bluster. I still think the North is sort of bluffing because they haven't actually taken any major steps that have real costs for them. So far right now, it's just a lot of talk, and that's what they do a lot. It's a little crazier talk than normal, but it's still just talk. Right? If they actually start to do stuff, then things change. So far they haven't, so that's why I'm skeptical.
Okay, it's really good to get your thoughts, Robert. Thanks very much. Robert Kelly there speaking to us from Pusan in South Korea.